The on-screen love of Shirin Farhad. The story of Shirin has been created in film and drama in India, Pakistan, Iran and Turkey. The best known to us are of course the Indian version from the 1950s, which had songs by talent Mahmood and more notably the Pakistani version from the 1970s starring Muhammad Ali and Jiba and featuring music by Khawaja Khurshid Anwar, including the famous song Ishq Mera Dewana by Mehdi Hassan. Most of these dramatic versions simply followed whatever formula happened to be current in the media at the time. The literary refinement of the classics was seldom reflected. Shirin was a Christian princess from Armenia and lived in the 6th century AD. She got married to Khusrau Parvez, the powerful Persian emperor of the Sassanid dynasty, and incidentally a grandson of Naushirwan the Just. The Persian remembered her by the name Shirin. Apparently it was a corruption of iron, but at the same time meant sweet in the language of Persian. In all probability, her marriage was a political one. Historical facts are scarce since the Arabs overran the country soon after her husband's death. Persia was reduced to a mere province of the West Arab Empire that stretched from Spain to Sinda. The new empire was centralist in nature, in which native cultivars were at best viewed with suspicion and at worst completely suppressed. Pahlavi, the language spoken in ancient Persian, became a dead language, or at least it was never written again. The situation lasted for 3 centuries. Sometime in the 10th century, the Arab Empire started falling apart. Sindh, Egypt, Turkey, Afghanistan and part of Persia became independent, very often under native rulers whose ancestors had converted to Islam. Muhammad Ghaznavi, Salahuddin Ayyubi and Alp Arslan Seljuki are some of the best examples of these rulers. Many of them paid nominal allegiance to the Arab Caliph at Baghdad, but encouraged movements for the revival for regional biases, cultures and regional jealousies. Pahlavi language could not be revived, but the pride of the Persian people, now mostly Muslim, worked up the birth of a new language out of the old tongue. It was the language today known as Persian, a hybrid of Pahlavi and Arabic vocabulary, following Pahlavi grammar in most instances but written in the Arabic script. Muhammad Ghaznavi was among the greatest patrons of this new language and encouraged historians to discover and record the pre-Islamic glory of Persia. Muhammad was a staunch liberal, where it didn't concern his prejudice against the minority sects of Islam or his political rivalry with the Indian rurals. He also commissioned the writing of the first great masterpiece in Persian. This was the Shahnameh, or the Book of Kings, written by Firdausi around 1226 AD. From this book originates that love story of Shirin as higher literature. Firdaus described Khusrau as a prince who fell in love with the Armenian princess and won her hand after much effort. As husband and wife, or king and queen, they lived like role models of a passionate couple, sort of an earlier day Jahangir and Nurjahan. When Khusrau's son from another wife killed him and wanted to marry Shirin, she asked permission to spend a night at her dead husband's tomb before taking a new one. This was granted but unsuspected. She smuggled a dagger and stabbed herself to death over her lover's coffin. It is obvious that Firdaus was working from some written histories now lost to us, and a lot of oral tradition, but above all, he also took into account that various folk tales that had developed around the Persian kings by that time. These were produced by 3 centuries of nostalgia about a forbidden past. In these tales, Shirin was exceedingly beautiful and Khusrau was a passionate young man. Apparently, the Persians had remembered him in a very difficult manner that the Arab historians, for whom he was mainly the impudent monarch who failed to honor the message of Islam in his court. However, it seems that either Firdaus or one of the writers of these folk stories was also inspired from a very unexpected fictional source, the Greek story of Pyramus and Thisbe. In that story, which was also narrated by the Latin poet Ovid in Metamorphoses, Thisbe stabs herself at the tomb of her dead lover Pyramus. The story later inspired the string of novels about Romeo and Juliet that were finally adapted by William Shakespeare for the Elizabeth stage. Apparently, Shirin became Thisbe in the folk memory of Persia, and the great poet, starting from Firdaus, carved that image on words that will last longer than marble and gilded stones. Firdaus didn't mention Farhad, however, a folk story that developed around a sculptor, Farhad, who engineered a stream of milk for her and then fell in love with Khusrau, was still wooing her. Khusrau invited Farhad to his court, questioned him, and then promised to give him Shirin if he removed the Bestone mountain from its place as it was blocking a passage to the royal palace. The sculptor, in a frenzy of passion, actually removed the mountain with his pickaxe, at which Khusrau sent an old woman to misinform Farhad that Shirin was dead. Upon hearing this news, the sculptor killed himself with his pickaxe. The first great poet to weave the Farhad legend into the love story of Shirin and Khusrau was Nizami Ganjavi, who lived in Azerbaijan in the 12th century AD. For parts, subscribe.